Okay, here we go. Chapter 29, Section 3 is Revolutionary Chaos in China. So this is about when the communists are going to come to power in China. The two main groups that are fighting during this time are the communists, obviously, and then the other group is called the nationalists. Now, this is a direct result of kind of some Cold War things that are happening. We'll discuss that more in detail next year. But this is just to give you the perspective of what's actually going on in China. So we're going to compare and contrast urban and rural China to identify some of the problems Chiang Kai-shek faced. Okay, and then how Mao Zedong is going to come to power. Okay, yes, he has a funny name. Okay, so the CCP in 1921, a group of radicals founded the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, that is the party that is still in power in China today. The Comintern agents, so Comintern is short for Communist International, and these people were from the Soviet Union mostly, and they urged the new party to join with Sun Yat-sen's Nationalist Party. Now Sun Yat-sen, he's the guy who's currently in charge of China during this time in the 20s, and they advise them to join and then kind of work their way in and then kind of slowly take over type deal, is the Comintern's suggestion to the communists in China. Now, Sun Yat-sen welcomed the opportunity to receive the expertise of Comintern contacts in the USSR. Now, he wants to have an alliance that's for like economic reasons, not necessarily political reasons. Um, he just wants to maybe take some ideas and integrate them slowly, but not go for the whole shoot and match type deal. The two parties form an alliance to oppose warlords and drive imperialist powers from China. So what was happening was the Japanese were trying to take over China kind of after the end of the First World War, and the Chinese were like, no, this is going to be decided by people who live in China, not outside people. So they make an alliance for a short time to get rid of warlords and to kick out imperialists. Okay, imperialists are just people who are expanding, trying to expand. Now, during this alliance, they formed an army to seize control of China because they want the settlements to be done between Chinese people, like I said. By 1927, the army controlled, uh, that's a typo, all of China south of the Changjiang or the Yangtze River. That's a pretty important river. It's north in China, so the Chinese control everything south of there. Okay, so they have most of their area back. Now, obviously, there's going to be tensions because once you get resolved with kicking out other people, then you're going to turn on each other. And so Sun Yat-sen, remember he's a nationalist there, his successor was Chiang Kai-shek. Now this guy, he he's got problems. He pretended to support the communists at first, but then he killed thousands of communists in the 1927 Shanghai massacre, which obviously ended the alliance. Now, Chiang Kai-shek was very corrupt. He was poor at managing money. He was not good at making allies and keeping them. He causes a lot of problems for the nationalists in China, and he is part of the reason why the communists will rise up um, during this time. But that is not till we got a ways to go. Anyway, he founded a new republic and worked to reunify China because they had been split. So he's trying to do things. Now the thing with China is you're either really poor or really rich. There's kind of no in between. There's no middle class really. And in China, there are a lot of poor peasants right now during this time period. A lot of farmers, a lot of other things, other jobs similar to that, rural communities, okay, during this time. So he's trying to reunify China to the way it was. And he continued to see communism as a great threat because he thought if the communists come and take over, the people will lose their freedom and their independence and yada yada. Okay, all that stuff that is somewhat mostly true. Now, so what's going to happen is the nationalists are in charge. Chiang Kai-shek is the man right now, and so Mao Zedong is the leader of the communists. Okay, he took over the group. He took control of a group that fled to the mountains. So they're up in the north. Okay, and then what happens is they're gonna go on this march that we'll talk about. Mao believed that the Chinese Revolution would be driven by the peasants rather than by the urban working class. So this kind of goes back to Marxism a little bit with the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, whereas the poor peasants are going to drive the revolution and not necessarily the middle, upper class, working class, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's kind of back to Marxism a little bit. Now what Chiang Kai-shek is going to do is he's going to hear about this, and he is going to drive the communists from Shanghai to Mao's camp. So he drives them all away. They go, and now basically what's happening is, yeah, the communists don't have a lot of land or support, but there are more people coming to this area, and word will spread rapidly about what's happening, and that's where they're kind of get their momentum a little bit. Now, Chiang attacked Mao's stronghold. Another typo, but was thwarted by Mao's guerrilla tactics. Okay, so what happens is Chiang Kai-shek attacks Mao Zedong's camp, but what's going to happen is that the communists are going to use guerrilla tactics, and what that is they dress up in monkey suits and sling bananas at them. Okay, that's a joke. Guerrilla tactics are you're hiding in like the trees or the bushes or whatever. Then you jump out, you attack, and then you run back into the trees. This tactic has been used many times throughout history. Famous examples during the Revolutionary War. The Patriots used guerrilla warfare. Here, guerrilla warfare. Another one would be Vietnam. That's an example of guerrilla warfare being used. There's some other ones too, but those are like some major ones. So then a blockade is going to form. Chiang's troops blockaded Mao's communist base and built forts to prevent communist raids. So basically what they do is they surround them and then they build forts. And basically if they try to leave, they're just going to shoot at them. The communists were cut off from their food supply. And so now this is a problem. So instead of staying, now what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to march. The long march, this is insane. There's no way I would survive this. It's way too much, way too far. And you're going to see the results of how many communists actually die. So, they eventually break through the nationalist defense, and then they march 6,000 miles. 6,000 miles to a communist base in northwest China. 6,000 miles. Yeah. So, that's what's going to happen. During this time, basically where they're marching to is they're marching to the mountains. In northwest China is characterized by mountains. And this is going to be a rough go, obviously. Communists are going to die. Only 9,000 survive. It takes them 1 year to march, or after 1 year, 9,000 communists die. Mao is now the sole leader of the Communist Party because everybody else had kind of abandoned and thought he was kind of crazy. But it appeared that the nationalists had little left to fear from Mao. Okay, they were dying, they're retreating, they're up in the mountains. There's no way they're going to get all this momentum. But the thing is that where they are marching to in China is where all the peasants live. So they're going to start to appeal to the peasants, just like with everybody else, and start to get control. Now, what's going to happen is, while the communists are away, um, China is going to go through some changes. Okay, there's a period of political training for the Chinese people. Chiang Kai-shek wants to get the people educated on what their political system is, basically. At the same time, the nationalists are using dictatorial powers to carry out land reform programs and industry modernization. So he is a dictator, okay, but he's trying to do it in a way that will improve the country as a whole and not harm people, if that makes sense. Um, Land reform programs, just trying to get it so that it's farmable again, and then have more industry, get it more modernized. China at this time is very behind uh, the rest of the world, so they're trying to modernize it that way. Up to the time, the nation had made only minor progress in the area of industrialization. Okay, but after this, and for the rest, China will catch up very quickly and start to pass everyone, especially when the communists come in. But that's for another day. Now, about 80% of the population of China were poor illiterate peasants. So illiterate, can't read or write. The Chinese had only made minor progress in industrializing their nation, okay, which was mentioned before. In the cities, a westernized middle class formed and provided Chiang's base for support. So westernized means that they're just taking ideas from Europe and bringing them over to China. And we will now get the middle class, and this will be good for the nationalists because the nationalists are backed by this class. The problem is that this is not a large class, and there's 80% is peasants. The two groups have little in common, right, with the poor peasants and with the middle class. So what's going to happen is Chiang tried to meld Western innovations with traditional Confucian values. Confucius, it's a philosophy, not a religion. It's just a way of life. And he tries to do that, but Confucianism is very old, and modern Western innovations are obviously not, so it's going to be kind of interesting. He starts a new life movement that promoted traditional Confucian social ethics and rejected Western capitalist values. The four parts of the new life movement were Li, Yen, and Qi, and those are all just like honor. I can't remember what they all stand for. It's honor and like I don't know. It's all ethics stuff. I can't remember. I took history of China so long ago. That was when I was a freshman in college. Anyway, if you want to know, I guess I could tell you later. You could just ask me and I'll look it up, or you could look it up. But anyway, he's trying to do that. His wife is trying to do some stuff too to make things better for women. But this new life movement, they're just trying to get back to the old ways, but do it more modern, I guess. Now it continued. It had little success. Confucianism had done nothing to slow China's long period of decline, so people really didn't want to be Confucius followers anyway, or Confucian, so they kind of deny it. They were especially ineffective in provinces that were only loosely controlled by his Nanjing government. So Nanjing is where his capital is. It's a town, it's a city, obviously in China. But the farther away you get from the capital, the harder it is to control, and so he's going to have problems there. Some progress he does make that is positive is he had highways built, and he extends the railroad. That's always good. Chinese-controlled factories. That's good. Improved the economy there. Foreign powers gave up control of many leases and returned the customs service to Chinese control, so there's not a lot of other influences in China anymore. Well, during this time, it's all Chinese owned, which is good. He establishes a national bank and improved education. um, which is obviously all good stuff. Fun fact, North Dakota is the only state in the country that has a state bank. So there you go, fun fact. Now, he suppressed all opposition and censored free speech. This is where his dictator tendencies come in. He alienated intellectuals and political moderates. Anybody that he didn't like, out of here. Okay, that's basically what that means. Now, failures, obviously. His land reform program had little effect. They didn't want to reform their land. They wanted to keep it how it was. He failed to press for the redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. Yeah, that's a big deal. Trying to even out the system. The classes got more and more divided. Peasants and poor townspeople saw no real improvements in their lives. Most of these improvements for the middle class and the wealthy class. As far as industrialization, in the 10-year period, it continued to grow slow. In spite of all this talks about trying to be modernizing and moving quickly through this stuff. The largest chunk of spending went to the military, obviously, and a handful of families controlled a large portion of the nation's wealth. So this is a problem. It's basically looking like communism without actually being communist, basically. And obviously the Great Depression doesn't help either, which was mentioned in section 1. Okay, so that's the end there. Okay, so this is just kind of some chaos. During World War II, China will put their differences aside. Again, the communists and the nationalists. And then after World War II is when the Chinese Revolution is going to happen, Communist Revolution. And Mao Zedong will come to power in the 50s, and then he'll die, and he's like a hero. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in the 60s and 70s in China. But anyway, so that's just kind of a background on China. It's important to note this stuff because for World War II, when Japan tries to come in and take over some stuff, we'll see how the Chinese unite and whatever. So.